everybody. Welcome to Exchange. It's been a while, but today we're going to have a great interview with my friend Laura Powell, who is an Islam specialist. And we just want to tell you about what she's going to be doing with women in apologetics and opportunities that you get to learn about Islam. So, Laura, go ahead and tell us about yourself.
Thank you. Yes. Well, let's see. I became a follower of Christ when I first heard the gospel at Duke University when I was 21 years old, in the midst of a culture of absolute relativism and with professors telling me there's no such thing as right and wrong, and it all just depends on you and what works for you. And I saw that lived out in the actions and behaviors of other students, and was really questioning a lot of things. And that culminated in my deciding to follow Christ, becoming convinced that the Bible is true and worth reading and following. And I began studying the Word. I went to a 1-year discipleship ministry in Colorado and was discipled by some really amazing people who had a huge impact on me. I got married. I went to Denver Seminary. That was an incredible 3 years of learning from brilliant, kind, committed followers of Jesus. And I began to be, um, well, I guess I would say that kind of led me to a role as the training and member care coordinator for Engineering Ministries International. And I was asked to help launch a team to the Middle East. So I started studying Islam myself. I didn't really know a whole lot about Islam. I took a course, semester-long course in Islam. I started reading the Quran. I visited some mosques and started getting to know some Muslims. And I went to Egypt and Jordan and spent some time there with Christians and some time with Muslims. And after that experience was over, I kind of thought that was the end of my time, of my involvement with Islam, really. But a year or two later, I was asked to go to Afghanistan and provide training and missionary care to missionaries, evangelists who were sharing the gospel, sharing the truth, loving Muslims there. And that was a really impactful experience. But again, I thought that was probably the end of my interactions with Muslims. Uh, a few years later, I was asked to go to Lesbos, Greece, with Samaritan's Purse during the height of the refugee crisis, when Muslims were they were leaving Afghanistan, Iraq, and Syria, and crossing through Turkey to get to Greece, because once they were on European Union soil, they had certain rights and privileges that they didn't have before. And that really was probably the most jarring and uh, life-changing experience. I spent most of my time in the refugee camps where people were receiving soup and dry clothes and things like that. But there was one day when our driver asked if I wanted to see around the island, and he took me to the shore where boats were arriving from Lesbos, to Lesbos from Turkey. And while I was on the shore, just in that short 45 minutes to an hour, two rafts full of people. And when I say rafts, people call them boats a lot in the media and the news. They tend to call them boats. But most of the people were put on rafts that were created for about maybe 15 people at the most for recreational purposes. And there were 50, 60 people at least being loaded onto these rafts. And while I was on the shore, two rafts full of people arrived, and two rafts full of people sunk in the Aegean Sea, and everybody died. That was, again, just really heart-wrenching and jarring. And even having just seen the two rafts that had arrived and seeing the looks on people's faces, the fear and the sense of relief when they got on dry land, but also like not knowing what to expect. women weeping and children with huge, eyes like deer in the headlights. And there was a man completely unconscious in one of the rafts. I don't know if he lived or died. There was vomit in the raft all over. Everybody was wet, and it was winter. A lot of people had died even after arriving from exposure, before relief organizations had started arriving and helping provide dry clothing and a place to sleep in tents and things like that. So that experience had a huge impact on me. My husband and I actually prayed about moving to Lesbos and serving there for a while, but that didn't end up working out, um, in part because Turkey signed an agreement with the European Union that they would stop the human trafficking, essentially, of getting people to Greece, at least that way. So I did decide, though, that I was going to be involved in ministering to Muslims where I was. I lived in Atlanta at the time. There's a huge refugee community in Clarkston, which is just in the Atlanta area. And I helped teach English to women. I became really close to one family in particular with 7 children, and I taught them every day after school. I would teach them English, reading, math, and history, and we would have great spiritual conversations. It was really just such a fun time. But eventually, we had to move for my husband's job, and we moved to a really rural area. There weren't many people there. There weren't many opportunities to get involved with ministry at all, much less to Muslims. And so I started writing about what I had experienced and writing apologetics and reasons for the hope that I have. And that resulted in my meeting Rachel Shockey and being invited to join the team at Women in Apologetics. So now we're launching our first ever video online course. We're so excited about it. And
So exciting.
it's, yes, such an amazing journey to get here. I never would have imagined this is where I would be, but I've seen God's hand in it the whole way, and I'm honored to be a part of it.
It's pretty crazy because most of the time when God puts us in ministry, it's nothing you would ever imagine for yourself. So I
Mhm.
mean, did you ever think this was the kind of ministry you would be doing? It's like, oh, I have a heart for Islam. This is what I want to do, or it's like, whoa, I have no idea what I'm doing.
Yeah, exactly. I actually never wanted to leave the US. I had a conversation that I remember very clearly when I was 21 years old, when I had just become a Christian, like within that week of my 21st birthday. And I was 21, I had graduated from college, and I was at this discipleship ministry in Colorado called Doulos Ministries. And several of the other women in my same position who were discipling these younger troubled teenagers and being discipled by older Christians, somebody asked, one of my friends asked, so if you guys could go anywhere in the world, where would you go? And one of the girls was like, oh, I want to be a missionary in Africa. And one of the girls was like, I want to be a missionary in Eastern Europe. And just everybody, whether they wanted to be a missionary or not, they all had these exotic places they wanted to go. And I said, I just want to go back to Florida because that's where I was born and raised. And they and they're like, you can't choose Florida. No, if you can go anywhere in the whole world, you cannot choose any place in the United States. Where do you want to go? I said, well, I don't want to leave the United States, but if you're going to make me choose a place, then I guess I'll go with Italy because that's where my dad's family is from.
I love
So
it.
yeah, they're like, oh, you're so boring. And now here, 20 years later, I've been to almost 30 countries, mostly for ministry, and I've worked with Muslims for 15 years in various capacities and launching an Islam course. This is not the direction I envisioned at all.
Yeah, same with me. I never thought I'd be called to do like mission work to college students. I just
Mhm.
I loved apologetics and I went and got a degree and I had no idea what I could do with it. And it's funny because I remember when I first became Christian, I was like, I could never be a missionary. That's just way too hard. And I was like, well, huh, let me just do this. And so,
Right.
okay, I'm a missionary in America.
Yep.
So, yeah, it's funny. Like things that we thought we were gonna do with our lives are completely different than what God has
Mhm.
envisioned for our lives. So it's just kind of cool. But like through it, you've just enjoyed the journey and you've just
Mhm.
have this amazing passion for teaching about Islam now. So
Mhm.
it's just like, and then people get to learn from you. So it's super cool what God's doing.
It
So
is. It's a lot of fun and a huge
yeah.
privilege.
So let's just get into Islam. And when people say, all religions are the same, they all lead to God. What would you say to somebody, because you've studied Islam and you're a Christian, and obviously there's some big differences. So, like, what would
Mhm.
you say to somebody who thinks all religions are the same?
Well, I've been told this many times, and so, a lot of times my response is, "It doesn't sound like you've studied
Yeah.
that many religions," because there are such fundamental, drastic differences. It's really inconceivable for me that someone could actually study what they teach and come to that conclusion. I think it's maybe become just a popular culture mantra,
Mhm,
but it's certainly not informed.
mhm,
And when people say that Islam and Christianity are basically the same, I I often respond that, I mean, I do like to ask questions, but really for our purposes here, maybe just to get to the point of your question, I would probably try to point out through conversation and questions that while we do have a lot of superficial beliefs in common, like we both believe that there's one God, we believe He's all powerful. We believe there were prophets who came. We believe Jesus was a miracle worker. Um, w- the commonalities are very superficial,
mhm.
and you really don't have to dig that deep in order to start to see major differences. So, for example, the God of Islam is not relational at all, and in fact, he cannot be known. Whereas the God of the Bible is inherently relational in nature. He's been relational as a trinity for all eternity past. He was relational in the Garden of Eden with Adam and Eve. He sent Jesus to come and have relationship with people and to make a way that for us to have relationship with the triune God. And we look forward to the new earth where we're going to be in perfect relationship with God without our sin getting in the way. So in Islam, in contrast, God has been alone for all eternity. They do not believe he's the Trinity, and he's been content for all eternity past to be alone. People are not um, his children who he wants to know, and he wants to know him. People are his slaves in the Quran. He's the slave master, and people are the slaves who serve him. And as I said, he cannot be known. So there are a lot of differences like that. The essence of the gospel is that Jesus, the second person of the Trinity, left glory, perfect relationship with the Father and Spirit, came to earth as a man, experienced every temptation as we have, but lived a perfect life, and then exchanged his perfection for our sinfulness and took on God's wrath for our sinfulness, and then rose from the dead to show that he was who he had claimed to be, that he was God incarnate, and that he had paid for our sins, and that we could now have hope in him. So that is absolutely critical to the gospel. That is the gospel. That is the good news. But Islam teaches that Jesus was not deity. He did not die, or he was not killed, he was not crucified. These things did not happen. And so, of course, then they also believe he didn't rise from the dead because he wasn't killed. So, right there, no matter how many superficial common beliefs we have, they've just rejected the entire gospel.
Mhm.
Islam also teaches that people are inherently good. We have the same nature by birth now that Adam had when he was created. And so we are perfectly capable of doing good and pleasing God sufficiently on our own. We don't need a savior. They believe that the problem with the world is not fallenness, but forgetfulness. And so the solution to forgetfulness is for God to send prophets and scriptures to remind us of what is good and right. Whereas we believe that the problem is our fallenness, and no matter how many times you remind us, no matter how many prophets come or scriptures come or how often we read the scriptures, we are still going to fall short of the glory of God. We need a savior. So there are just so many very major differences that really, when you start to study these two worldviews, I don't know how people can conclude that they're basically the same and they lead to the same place. God is described completely differently. Jesus is described completely differently. People, humanity is totally different. The problem with the world is totally different. God's solution to the problem is totally different. And and the commands for excellent living are completely different. There's some overlap. We are, uh, we're both encouraged to pray, to submit to God, but there are huge, huge differences in how we pray, even uh, what we're supposed to do, what the rules are, and um, and even in the nature of peace versus violence and things like that. So there are major, major differences in how we're supposed to live, in addition to what we believe and how we can live with God for eternity.
Yeah, I really think that aspect of a relational God is
Hmm.
completely different between Christianity and Islam. And so I
Hmm.
heard a story from my aunt that one of her friend's daughters had left Islam, and the mom was begging her to come back to Islam. And the daughter's like, "Well, if you could ever show me somewhere in the Quran that God loves me, I'll come back."
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
I don't think she's ever gone back because there isn't anything that says that God loves them. So, I
Right,
mean, that's a big difference because, I mean, Jesus came and died for us because he loved us. So, big, big
right.
difference. Yeah.
Exactly. That's a huge difference. The God of Islam has never suffered and would never suffer for people. He does not prioritize love as something that's important to him as an action, and it's not an important characteristic of his. And there's, again, like you said, like your friend said, there's really no reason to believe from the Quran that God loves people. He's very clear that he does not love the disobedient. There are many different verses in the Quran telling who God does not love, but there really is no good reason to believe that he does love us. Even when we are obedient, he's willing to accept us as good slaves,
Mhm.
but not as children whom he loves and would sacrifice for.
So, when we meet a Muslim person, what are the most basic things what are the basic things they believe? So, like, if we want to like have conversations with them, what
Mhm.
should we know?
Yeah, so it's good to know that it is a monotheistic belief. And so they do believe there's one God, but they believe that while there were many prophets who came throughout history to different people, they believe Muhammad is the last and greatest prophet. His life is put forth in the Quran as the beautiful pattern of conduct for Muslims to follow. So it's very important that Muslims know something about the life of Muhammad, and it's important that we as Christians, know something about the life of Muhammad if we want to understand Islam, because Muhammad's life is not laid out in the Quran. The Quran is put forth as commands and mini sermons from God himself. But we don't learn a lot about Muhammad's life, his actions, his decisions, his words from the Quran itself. So we have to look in the Hadith, which are collections of sayings and traditions and actions of Muhammad. So that's one point. Like I said, they do believe God is all powerful. They also believe he's merciful, sovereign, just, not relational, not a trinity, not willing to suffer for his people, not loving the disobedient. But there are enough commonalities to start to build bridges that help lead us to a conversation about our differences. They believe Jesus was a great prophet. They believe he was a miracle worker. They believe he lived a good life, but they do not believe that he was deity, that he was crucified, or that he rose from the dead. They even believe that Jesus was born of a virgin. So that's really interesting to me, because even people who identify themselves as progressive Christians usually reject the virgin conception, and yet Muslims believe in a virgin birth. And so there is a lot to talk about there. But they ultimately have a very different view of Jesus when it comes to the most important issues. They believe that people make mistakes but are not sinful in nature, that we're created good and we're able to do good, we're able to please God by our works. And like I said, the problem, they believe, is that people are weak and forgetful, and the solution is to know the scriptures and follow the prophets. And it's important to God that every people group throughout all of time have a prophet that came to them to give them the message of truth. And so they actually believe in more. They would name far more prophets in history than I think probably any Christian would name from the Bible. When Muhammad when he first had his first encounter with a being, I call it a being. Muhammad originally thought that he was visited by a demon, and eventually he changed his story to say that it was an angel who visited him when he was in a cave praying. And this so-called angel threw him up against a cave repeatedly and told him to read, even though he didn't know how to read. It's a very violent encounter. Muhammad walked away from it terrified, twitching, really scared. He went home. He told his wife to hide him under the covers. He became suicidal. So it very much does sound like a demonic encounter. But when Muhammad was about to commit suicide, this being visited him again and convinced him not to. And his wife, Khadija, and her uncle convinced Muhammad, oh, this must be an angel who visited you, because you're such a good man. There's no way a demon would visit you. It must be an angel. And you're probably a great prophet. That's why the angel visited you. So ultimately, Muhammad went with this story. So he was preaching to Christians and Jews and polytheists in and around Mecca that he was the great prophet of Judaism and Christianity that they had been waiting for. Well, Jews and Christians weren't waiting for another great prophet. We were waiting for the return of Christ himself. And in the meantime, we're expecting a whole bunch of false prophets. So Jews and Christians rejected his message. Some of the pagans accepted his message, but ultimately he was forced to flee from Mecca. He went to Medina, where he began gaining a bigger following. He began attacking anyone who had rejected Islam, especially people from back in Mecca. And he spent the last 10 years of his life fighting battles in the name of Allah and commissioning others to do the same. So this is someone who devoted most of his life of ministry to raiding caravans, attacking people who rejected Islam, and ultimately attacking everybody who was not a Muslim and commanding his followers to do the same thing. This is the beautiful pattern of conduct for all Muslims to follow. So they do believe that Jesus never died and that he will return one day to defeat the Antichrist. And they believe that those whose good deeds outweigh their bad deeds will go to paradise or heaven, while everybody else will go to hell.
So, when you come across, Muslims, do they know all these stories about Muhammad, or is just kind of word of mouth that it spreads what his life was like? Because I know he doesn't really have like a very good life story. I mean, he has a lot of things that we as Christians would not think something you should follow, right?
Right. Exactly. Yeah, it depends on which Muslims you're talking about. So the majority of Muslims do not read the Quran or the Hadith. They don't read the Quran in any language they understand. They will, if you ask a Muslim, do you read the Quran? Every In my experience, I think every Muslim has answered that with a yes. But when I probe a little bit deeper, I find that they've never read the Quran in a language they understand. They've memorized the Arabic sounds of a few select verses that they've been told to memorize for their prayers. But they don't understand the Quran. They don't know what it says. And they're taught that the Quran is only in Arabic. It cannot be translated. It cannot be updated into a more readable language that's modern. Even modern Arabic, it can't be updated. And so only about 20% of Muslims speak any form of Arabic at all. And it's not the classical Arabic of the Quran. So what we have is 80% of Muslims who cannot read their scriptures at all, can't even begin to read them because they don't know the language that it has to be read in. And then we've got about 20% who know a modern form of that language, but it's a very difficult book to read. It's very dry. It's, it would be kind of like us reading Shakespearean poetry without having been trained in that and having to take our life lessons from that with no help or education to train us to understand that. And then there are a lot of cultural values as well that discourage them from reading it. Actually, in the Islam Foundations course, I think I give about 8, 10, 12 reasons why Muslims don't read the Quran and the Hadith. So I've just given you one. But a second one is culturally, they're told to just listen and obey, believe, don't question, don't doubt. The scholars will tell you what you need to know. And the way to be approved of, to live a good life and be thought well of in society is to pass on what you've been told from your leaders, not to go reading the sources for yourself, not to think critically, not to evaluate whether or not something is true or look for evidence, but rather to believe whatever you're told and pass that on to your children and their children. So there are a lot of reasons why Muslims are not informed about their sources. The Hadith are collections of the life of Muhammad, but we're talking about volumes and volumes and volumes of multiple collections. There is so much material here that it's really, it takes a lot of intentionality to even start those. It takes effort and persistence to have access to them and to purchase them, certainly if you are not from a family that is wealthy. So there are just a lot of reasons why Muslims don't read the sources for themselves. And so so whether or not they know, getting back to your question, do they know these about the life of Muhammad? It depends on who their leaders are and how honest their leaders have been. A lot of Muslims have been told Muhammad was just a great man who loved everybody, who lived a great life. He was so self-sacrificial. He was so kind. Yes, he defended himself when he was attacked by Christians and Jews and pagans, but he wasn't aggressive. They certainly don't know that he married a 6-year-old girl and he started having sex with her when she was 9. They don't know a lot of the horrific things he did, like assassinating people in their sleep, um, uh, conquering unarmed cities who didn't even know that they were at war with anybody, things like this. So, those who do know that Muhammad lived this way will usually either leave Islam or become radicalized themselves. So, the so-called radical Muslims are actually the people who are following the commands of the Quran and imitating the life of Muhammad. These are the the faithful Muslims who know their sources and are doing what they said. But like I said, the majority of Muslims don't read their sources, so it's not safe to assume, it's not wise to assume that all Muslims want to hurt us or kill us or do harm to us.
So probably majority of the ones that we would meet are, just trying to be good people. And then the ones that are radicalized are usually what, hiding out, or like, how does that all work out?
Well, they are, within the US, there are Muslims on both sides all over the place.
Mhm.
So, and it's hard to know who believes what because there's also this not only acceptance, but um, encouragement for Muslims to deceive and lie to non-Muslims for the sake of the spread of Islam. That's what Muhammad did. He frequently lied and deceived people who trusted him in order to eventually kill them. He encouraged his followers to do the same. So we don't really know. It's hard to know who is just kind of deceiving us. There's a verse in the Quran that says not that Muslims are not ever to be friends with non-Muslims, and they can pretend to be friends with us if they feel like they need us, but that they need to hate us in their hearts and just use us for the time that they need us for security or otherwise. But again, a lot of Muslims don't know this and would be appalled at this. So statistically, I think uh, about just over half of Muslims would like to see Sharia as an option in the US, which is the Muslim law. And that allows for the killing of non Muslims. It allows for the killing of daughters who bring shame upon the family by, for example, looking at a boy or not following one of the rules, something like that. It allows for the killing of apostates, those who leave Islam. And then, but that's just over about 50%. There are about 20% who admit in surveys that violence should be used in order to make Islam the law of the land in America. It's about 20% think that violence for the sake of Islam in the US is a good idea. That's a significant and scary number, I think, percentage at least. But Muslims are such a small percentage of the population overall. I think they make up about 1% of people in America right now. So when you take 20% of 1%, you get a fairly small number. But again, there are lots of other Muslims who would say that's what they came here to escape. They don't want that. They don't want Sharia. They don't want people killed for not following Islam. They don't want people killed for being bad Muslims. They just want to live in peace, get an education, and live the American dream, have opportunities, things like that.
Mhm. So I know in some European countries, is Sharia being implemented in parts of Europe?
I have heard that in some parts there are Sharia tribunals, so court systems where Muslims can be tried instead of the ordinary courts where other people are tried. And so, yeah, in these situations, if someone has committed acts of violence against someone else, as long as they've done it in the name of Allah for the spread of Islam, then they are, they're judged to be in the right. So this is very scary. There's also this culture developing in Great Britain and Germany and elsewhere where even where there aren't separate court systems in place at this time, the leaders are working so hard to protect Islam and the reputation of Muslims that Muslims are being held to a completely separate standard than non-Muslims are being held to. So it's really quite concerning.
Mhm.
And I do think it's really important that we be aware of that. It has really important policy implications. But I also can't emphasize enough that this does not this should not mean that we run away and hide from Muslims and give up on them entirely. Islam is a religion of extreme emptiness, hopelessness, terror, and this is an opportunity for us to interact with people who who may want hope, who may want joy, who may want the truth. And a lot of even the radical Muslims are desperate for heaven. They're desperate for paradise. And so even if they don't necessarily hate Christians and Jews and polytheists, they are willing to blow themselves up and take out infidels in the process because they want God that much. They want paradise that much. And we have the true way to paradise. We have the true hope and joy that comes with that without having to blow ourselves up, without committing any acts of violence. And so I think it's just really an incredible opportunity that we need to make the most of.
We could go on forever, but that's why
Yeah.
you have a class that you're offering
Yes.
with Leah. And so tell us about that class. How long does it go for? When can people sign up? Is there like a certain number of students you're only taking? And if there's any cost, those kinds of things?
Yeah, great questions. We are not capping the class at a certain number. This is the first time we're offering it, so we may change our minds about that. But registration is open. We have 22 people signed up as of yesterday, and registration closes on May 17th. So now is the time to register at womeninapologetics.com under academics and then WIA Academy. So the Islam Foundations course should be pretty easy to find from the womeninapologetics.com site, but I can also give you the link to include in the description box if that's helpful. Let's see, as far as the topics that we'll be teaching, we'll be talking about major tenets of Islam. We'll be talking about why there's such a diversity of belief with Islam. As I mentioned, I said that I gave one or two reasons why Muslims aren't likely to read the Quran. There are more. We talk about more similarities and differences with Christianity. We talk in depth about the calling and life and teachings and the death of Muhammad. It's all really fascinating. And how all of these things, his calling, his life, his teachings, his death, show that he was a false prophet. We also equip participants in this course to provide evidence for Jesus' deity, death, and resurrection. If you don't already know how to respond to someone who says Jesus never died, or Jesus never claimed to be God, or Jesus didn't rise from the dead, you have to take this course. We also equip people to respond to challenges to the Trinity, because Muslims raise the Trinity in early on in conversations with Christians. They've been taught that it's contradictory, it's nonsense, it's illogical, it makes absolutely no sense, and it's absolutely ridiculous. And so we talk about how to respond to that, and we learn about their parallel belief, which is called Tawheed. We equip people to respond to challenges to the reliability of the Gospels, and not only how to defend our own beliefs, but also to make an effective case on multiple fronts to refute Islam. So the structure of the course is 20 video lessons, about 20 minutes each, to watch during the week on your own time. And then we'll have an optional Zoom Q&A session with guests each week for 10 weeks. So the course lasts 10 weeks. We ask that people watch 2 of these 20-minute videos a week on their own time. We're going to give a discussion question and opportunities for them to interact with each other online. We will have study guides with major points, quotes, fill in the blanks, and we'll have 2 assignments. One, we'll ask people to interview a Muslim, and then the other will ask people to interview a non-Muslim and write a short summary of each, and I'll provide the questions for those interviews. But I'm really excited right now about the Zoom interviews with other guests who have agreed to come alongside us in this course and offer their experiences, their stories, their knowledge. We've got scholars, apologists, Muslim background believers, missionaries to the Taliban. It's going to be absolutely fascinating to listen and learn from these people, in addition to the video courses that we have prepared. So the time commitment's probably about 1 to 2 hours a week.
Okay.
And anyone who's interested in learning about Islam should take this course. And we use the Islamic sources themselves as our source material. This is not something where we've just gone out and found the opinions of Christians to find out what Muslims believe. We use the Islamic sources as our source of information. People don't need to own those or buy those or anything like that, but that's our source. Anyone who's interested in learning about how to interact with Muslims effectively will be interested in this course. And as I said before, anyone who's interested in learning to use evidence to support and defend their Christian beliefs should certainly take this course. As I said, registration is open from now until May 17th. So I'd encourage people to go to womenandapologetics.com. We have a 2-minute teaser video on there. We have the titles and a short description of every single lesson, all of the 20 lessons that we'll go through over the 10-week course. And we've already had a lot of really great questions regarding the course, and so we have an explanation on the website for that answers a lot of those questions that people have had.
Yeah. And is there a cost to this?
That's the other question you asked. Yes, it's $25.
Oh,
So
that's totally dealable, everybody. Everybody
it
needs to take this course.
yes, we do not want anybody to give up this opportunity because of cost. We've made it as low as we possibly could. We've had a team of amazing volunteers put this together, but yet with tremendous skill and experience and expertise. So this is high quality work for a very, very low cost. I did a bunch of research when I was helping our leadership decide what to charge. I thought that they were going to look at my research results and decide to charge maybe, I don't know, $150, something like that. But somehow they were able to make it work for $25 per person. So I would say take advantage of this. It's going to be amazing.
Yeah, and tell your friends about it too. We want as many people to join in on this class. It's a great opportunity to learn, and Laura is going to be teaching, and it sounds like you guys are going to have a lot of like awesome people who are going to be a part of it. So, are you going to hear stories from like ex-Muslims and
Yes.
that is
Yes.
really cool.
Yeah. I'm very excited about our guests who are going to share on the Zoom meetings once a week. So yes, we have an ex-Muslim from Iran with a fascinating story of what it was like to be a Muslim and in Iran, and to leave Iran. And we have, like I mentioned, a missionary to the Taliban in rural Afghanistan who has absolutely fascinating stories. We have apologists and scholars in specific areas. It's a really great lineup of people. I couldn't have asked for anything better, and so I'm really, really excited about that.
I think I need to sign up too. This sounds
Yes,
exciting.
you
So
should.
everybody
That'd
out
be
there
great.
need to sign up because that's such a good deal. I mean, if you want to study Islam, you mean even just buying your books and all that stuff's going to be way more than 25 bucks. So why not
Right.
learn from people who studied and people who've actually lived through it and people who've ministered to Muslims and
Mhm.
like I always tell people when you read a textbook and you meet somebody who adheres to religion, they're not going to be that textbook that you read. It's going to
Right.
sometimes very different from what you read. So it's always good to
Yes.
hear from people who've actually gone out there and have met these people, have had conversations with these people, and just be better ministers of the gospel to people. So
Yes.
Laura, thank you so much for all your hard work. I'm so excited for your course. I'm excited for WIA. So everybody go check out womeninapologetics.com and everything they have to offer. And I just pray that this goes really well and it just be so successful.
Thank you so much. Yes, we're very excited. We'd love to have you join the course.
Yeah.
And yeah, again, just take this opportunity because it's great material at a great cost. And we're all very, very excited about it.
All right. Well, I will link everything on the video so you guys could find out if you have no idea what we were talking about. So we will link you to that information and I just encourage everybody to sign up for those classes. So we will see you another time. Thanks, Laura.
Thank you. Bye.